I know humans mark time in days, and someone on the station told me later that the day I arrived was a Tuesday. I did not know what that meant then. I only knew that the ship carrying the San Imperial delegation had undocked 17 minutes after I was escorted through the airlock, and that not one member of that delegation had looked back through the viewport. I stood in the receiving corridor of Waystation Hevel 7 with 2 crates of personal effects, a temporary identification chip pressed into my left wrist, and the quiet understanding that I was no longer anyone's concern. The diplomat who had processed my arrival, a young human woman with her hair pulled back and a badge that said, Junior Liaison, Deck Administration, handed me a thin plastic card and said, Room 14C is on the 14th level. Elevators down the hall, second left. Cafeteria closes at 2100, just a heads up. Then she turned back to her screen. No bow, no formal address, no recitation of my titles. I had 11 of them, though the shortest, third daughter of the Imperial San, bearer of the 7th Meridian crest, was still longer than most beings' entire names. She had said none of them. She had simply handed me a card and gone back to work, because to her, I was just another temporary resident who needed to know where the cafeteria was. I stood there for a long moment. My ridge spines, the bioluminescent structures that ran along my collar and down my shoulders, had been gray for so long that I had stopped noticing. Among my people, bright spines meant status, confidence, vitality. Gray meant the opposite. I had been gray since I was 12 cycles old, which is when I understood what it meant to be the 17th heir in a line of 17. I found the elevator. I found room 14C. I sat on the edge of the sleeping platform and looked at the plastic card in my hands. It had my name on it. Just my name. Not my rank, not my bloodline, not even my species designation. Just Velira Son. I had never seen my name written alone before. I got lost on the 3rd day. Hevel 7 was not a small station. It processed cargo from 11 different trade routes and housed a permanent population of around 4,000. With another 2,000 transient workers and travelers rotating through at any given time. The corridors on Deck 9 looked exactly like the corridors on Deck 8, and I had taken a wrong turn somewhere near the atmospheric processing units, and I was standing in a dead-end maintenance passage, wondering whether asking for help would make things worse. A hatch in the floor opened. A man came up out of it, the way a person emerges from deep water, slowly, then all at once. He was wearing a gray worksuit covered in grease that had dried to a brownish color, and he was carrying a wrench that probably weighed more than my smaller crate. He pushed the hatch closed with his boot, turned around, and stopped when he saw me. Oh, he said. Hey, I said nothing. Among my people, silence in the presence of a stranger is a signal of waiting for them to establish their rank. He did not appear to understand this, or perhaps did not care. You look like you're about to cry, he said. You okay? No one had ever asked me that before. Not in those words. My people had attendants who monitored my health, tutors who checked my progress, officials who confirmed my scheduled appearances. No one had ever looked at my face and asked if I was okay, as though the answer genuinely mattered to them. I am lost, I said. My translator chip converted my words into the standard human dialect used on the station. It gave my voice a slight echo quality that I found embarrassing. He did not seem to notice. Where are you trying to get? He said. The commissary on Deck 12. He thought for a moment. Okay, yeah, you went one level too far down and took the wrong junction. Come on, I'll walk you to the main corridor, and you'll see the signs from there. He walked me to the main corridor. He pointed out the signs. He said, You're good from here, and turned to go back the way we came. Thank you, I said. He turned back and gave me a small nod. Marcus, he said, tapping his chest. I understood this was his name. Velira, I said. Nice to meet you, Velira, he said, and walked away. I stood looking at the corridor signs for a moment. My ridge spines, still gray, pulsed once very faintly. A reflex so automatic, I did not notice it until later, when I was back in room 14C thinking about the day. Among my people, that pulse meant something I did not have a word for in the human language. The closest translation would be, surprised to be treated as though I exist. The cafeteria was loud and warm, and smelled of 100 things I could not identify. I sat at the far end of a long table, and tried to determine which of the food options would not cause me harm. because the nutrition briefing I had been given before leaving the Empire was 3 pages long and mostly concerned with what I could not eat, which was almost everything. I was still reading the menu panel when Marcus sat down across from me. He had a tray. He had also, apparently, had the same thought, because alongside his own food he had placed a small sealed container that he slid toward me without ceremony. I asked the cook, he said. She says that's SAN compatible. No guarantees, but she checked the label twice. I looked at the container, then at him. You knew I was SAN? Your ridge spines, he said, nodding at my collar. I looked it up after I got back from the maintenance hatch. Wanted to make sure I hadn't done something offensive. The fact that he had gone back and checked, not out of political obligation, not because protocol required it, but simply because he wanted to make sure he had not caused harm to a stranger, sat in my chest like something warm and unfamiliar. You did not do anything offensive, I said. Good, he said, and started eating. I opened the container. It was a soft protein blend, slightly bland, but safe. I ate in silence for a moment. Then, because I genuinely wanted to know, why did you do this? He looked up. Do what? Bring me food. Look up my species. Walk me to the corridor. He appeared to consider this seriously, which I appreciated. He was not the kind of person who gave careless answers to real questions. You looked like you needed a hand, he said finally. That's it, really. I did not know what to say to that, so I said nothing. And we finished our meal, and he told me that the coffee on Deck 7 was better than the cafeteria coffee, and that if I ever wanted to not feel like I was drinking warm brown sadness, I should try it. I went and tried it 2 days later. He was right. Marcus worked the maintenance rotation on decks 8 through 11, which meant he was everywhere and nowhere, appearing out of hatches and around corners with tools in his hands and a practical expression on his face. Over the following weeks, I found myself learning the station by following the same routes he worked. Not because I was following him exactly, but because those routes made sense, and he had shown me how the station was actually organized rather than how it appeared to be organized. I also found myself in the middle of a systems failure on Deck 10, during what Marcus called a perfect storm of bad timing. 3 atmospheric regulators had failed simultaneously. The station's backup systems had activated, but there was a calibration conflict in the pressure distribution matrix that the automated repair protocol could not resolve. 3 engineers were standing around a wall panel, looking at it the way people look at a problem they do not know how to start solving. I looked at it for 40 seconds. Your distribution matrix is treating this as a single system fault, I said. It is actually 2 separate faults with overlapping error signatures. If you isolate the secondary regulator's feedback loop and reset the calibration baseline independently, the conflict resolves itself. Silence. Then one of the engineers said, "How?" I showed her. It took 17 minutes. The atmospheric readings stabilized. Marcus, who had arrived sometime during the middle of it, was leaning against the corridor wall with his arms crossed when I turned around. "Where did you learn that?" he said. "I had very good tutors," I said, "for a very long time. There was not much else to do." He looked at me with an expression I was still learning to read on human faces. It was not pity. It was something quieter. "Can you teach me what you just did?" he said. I blinked. "You want to learn it?" "Yeah," he said. That was a smart fix. "I want to understand it," I taught him. We sat in the maintenance corridor for 2 hours, with a diagnostic panel between us, and I explained the underlying logic of overlapping fault signatures, and he asked questions that were precise and honest, and showed that he was actually listening. It was the first time in my life that my knowledge had felt like something given, rather than something performed. A month after I arrived, a SAN merchant ship docked for a cargo transfer. The merchant came through the receiving corridor at the same time I was walking to Deck 7 for coffee. He saw me and stopped immediately. He dropped into a formal bow, the deep kind, the 90-degree angle that is reserved for the 3rd tier of the Imperial bloodline, held for a full 5 seconds, his eyes on the floor. Every human in that corridor stopped moving. Marcus was behind me. He watched the whole thing without speaking. Later, when we were walking with our coffees, he said, "What was that?" I told him. My titles, my rank, the Imperial bloodline, all 17 heirs, and where I sat among them. I told him in the flat, factual voice I used when discussing things I had long since made peace with. He was quiet for a moment, then, just that. Just one word. said in a tone that communicated that he had received the information, processed it, and placed it in the correct category, which was apparently the same category as everything else he knew about me. "Coffee's getting cold," he said. My ridge spines blazed gold for a single second. I pressed my collar with my fingers as though I could hide it. He had already looked away. I had been on the station for 6 weeks when I understood what humans were. I understood it not from any single moment, but from accumulation. From watching a junior technician argue with the station commander about scheduling, openly, in a corridor, with other people present, and the commander listen and change her decision. From watching Marcus buy a meal for a cargo worker who had arrived 2 days before payday, without being asked, and without mentioning it afterward. From watching the entire maintenance crew stop work for 20 minutes, to help a child who had gotten separated from their parent in the cargo bay, every single one of them treating it as the obvious priority. My people had a concept of duty. It meant obligation enforced by rank. Humans had something different, something that looked like duty, but came from a different place entirely. It did not seem to require anyone to be watching. It did not require a superior to have given an order. It simply appeared, the way breathing appears, because it was simply what they did. I was still thinking about this when the Imperial liaison ship arrived. I knew what it meant before the docking announcement finished. I had known it would come eventually. The Empire had found a use for me, a marriage arrangement that required an Imperial representative of the correct bloodline tier, which I happened to be, and which I had stopped being useful for the moment I had been left here, and which I had apparently become useful for again, now that 2 other candidates had been removed from consideration. Commander Threx came through the airlock in full Imperial dress. He addressed me by every one of my 11 titles, in the correct order, which took 45 seconds. He explained that I was to prepare for departure within the standard period. He used the word return 6 times, as though repetition would make it feel like something other than what it was. Marcus walked into the docking bay with a thermos in his hand. He looked at Threx. He looked at me. He looked at Threx again. "Hey Vel," he said. "You look like you want to leave." Threx turned to look at him. "This is an Imperial matter," he said. "You have no standing here." "She does," Marcus said simply. Threx explained. Then, in precise and formal language, exactly who he was, what authority he held, and under what legal framework Valera San was required to comply with an Imperial summons. It was a very thorough explanation. Marcus listened to all of it. He did not interrupt. When it was finished, he looked at me. "Do you want to go?" he said. The question was so simple that it almost did not reach me. No one had asked it. Not Threx, not any of the Imperial officials who had been managing my posting, not anyone in the Empire who had arranged any part of my life for the last 200 cycles. The question assumed that my answer mattered. It assumed that what I wanted was a relevant piece of information. I looked at Threx. I straightened my shoulders. My ridge spines, which had gone gray the moment his ship had docked, began, slowly, to lighten. "I am exercising my right of self-petition under the San 8th Accord," I said. "I am claiming lawful residence in a neutral space outside Imperial jurisdiction, pending independent review." The corridor was quiet, Threx said, very carefully. "That accord has not been invoked in 300 cycles." "I am aware," I said. "I have been studying." And then something happened that I had seen coming, in small ways, for weeks, without ever understanding what it would look like when it was real. The docking bay was not empty. There were mechanics on a shift break, a cargo coordinator going over manifests, a cook delivering supplies to one of the docked transports, 2 engineers from the atmospheric team. They were all in different places, doing different things, and none of them had been told to come, and none of them had been given orders. One by one, without a word, they moved. They arranged themselves, not aggressively, not with any threat, simply with presence, between me and the man who had come to take me somewhere I did not want to go. They stood there the way people stand when they have decided something, quietly and without drama, and Threx looked at them the way a man looks at a calculation he did not expect to have to make. He was very good at reading shows of force. He read this one correctly. He told me his legal team would be in contact. He told me this was not over. He walked back through the airlock with his retinue, and the docking bay doors closed, and the station kept moving in the dark the way it always did, reliable and steady, and full of people who had somewhere to be. Marcus handed me the thermos. "Coffee," he said, "before it goes cold." I took it. My ridge spines were gold. I stayed. The station gave me an official title, Interspecies Systems Consultant, which Marcus said was way too fancy for someone who fixes things, and I told him that was precisely the point. I fixed things. I taught the engineering team what my tutors had taught me, and I learned from them things my tutors had never thought to mention. I learned that arguments can be respectful. I learned that a person can change their mind without losing anything. I learned what it feels like to walk into a room and have people look up because they are glad to see you, not because protocol requires acknowledgement. They had left me here like a thing that was no longer needed. The humans had kept me like I was something worth keeping. I was still learning, every day in small ways, that both of those things were true at once, and that the second one was the only one that mattered. My ridge spines were gold more often than gray now. Sometimes, in the cafeteria or a maintenance corridor or the Deck 7 coffee line, I would catch one of the crew glancing at them with a small, satisfied expression, the way people look when something they were hoping for has quietly come to pass. I did not tell them what gold meant. I thought they probably already knew.